What black market did kids at your school run? MP3s and CDRs were just becoming available. A guy I knew made an absolute killing on mix CDs. Every week he circulated forms to fill out, where you selected the songs you wanted on the CD. The newest hits were at the top and changed weekly. The rest of his library filled the rest of the form, and there was a space for requests. He would deliver your disc the following week. He seriously made bank for a couple of years until everybody started getting their own songs from LimeWire or whatever. I don't know what he's doing now 20 years later, but I don't doubt he's successful. Story 2. This girl, Danielle, convinced my best friend and I, along with some other people, that she could forever change the taste of saliva in our mouth, so that our saliva would taste like watermelon, cotton candy, bubblegum, etc. forever. She made us wait a couple of days so we could really think about what flavor we wanted in our mouth forever. For example, she would tell us, "Are you sure you always want everything you eat to have a hint of watermelon?" Anyway, after a couple of days we picked a flavor and she charged us money. I can't remember how much, but it was probably like 50 cents or something. She made us chew on all this crazy stuff like paper clips, erasers, and other things. Obviously, our saliva never changed flavor and she stopped this. But I worked at Starbucks a couple years ago in my hometown and she came in and didn't even recognize me. All I could think about was how that girl had me chewing on paper clips. I guess scam artists start young. Kind of impressive though. That was a lot of hoops to jump through and they really sold it. The whole thing of, hey, just take a second to think about this. I feel like that would get me too as a kid, I'm not gonna lie. I do feel like some important information is missing here though. What age were you? Because there is an age where this becomes unacceptable to fall for. Story 3. Nintendo games. Some kids sold them off for like 10 or 15 bucks a pop. I don't know where he got them from, but he said he just told his dad what he wanted and his dad would get it for him. He would ask for the same ones over and over and it didn't matter. He would end up with 5 copies and he would just sell 4 of them. Either the kid was the most spoiled brat in history or his dad was straight up stealing them anyhow. Anyway, I could never get any. I had a Sega. But I remember that kid making an absolute killing in 3rd grade. I really hope the dad was getting them at a discount or something somehow, because if not, this is like the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Dad's out there buying new games for like $40, $50, $60. Kid gets them and then sells it for $15. Stonks. Story 4. Apple laptops in middle school. Some had iTunes, some didn't, and the kids wanted it, so apparently I was the only one who knew how to transfer the installer with my USB. I put it on everyone's laptop for gifts, favors, etc. in return. Got caught by the sub that day. I told her it was my flash drive, I could do what I wanted with it. And that's how I got the second detention of my life. Story 5. I was in elementary school when Pogs were big. Everyone had cool slammers and stuff, but I didn't have money for good ones. My dad made one out of 1/2-inch mild steel for me and used an engraving pen to make a simple pattern. Everyone was asking me where I got it from. Didn't want to lose my unfair edge, but I also knew I could make money. My dad had a big sheet of this 1/2-inch steel. I told them I was the only one who could get them, and I sold them for 15 bucks a pop. My dad kept 10 and I got 5. And that's when I learned what overhead was. Now, 15 bucks per pog? That seems excessive, but if kids were willing to pay, it's whatever the market can bear, right? I took an economics course once. Story 6. I lived in an age with a lot of retiree age people, a lot of which ended up raising their grandchildren. It really isn't a good area. Being older and from a rural area, they still don't trust online sites like eBay or Amazon. So I started ordering people things from those sites for actual money, and I added a charge for me to be making money off of it. It eventually got shut down because I got someone a USB in the shape of a pistol. It was the size of a USB and clearly a USB, but that didn't matter. The principal actually got the police involved to try to get me in real trouble. This can't be the States, right? Because there's no way that rural US would have a problem with a gun-shaped USB. I refuse to believe it. Story 7. So I just heard this story from one of my father's employees. We'll call him Fitz. When Fitz was in 5th grade, he sold cinnamon toothpicks that had soaked in cinnamon extract. He made a killing. Well, this girl, Karen, wanted to get in on the action. She started selling the toothpicks too. Her older brother also had a toothpick business on the side. Karen's brother liked to sell toothpicks that had been soaked in LSD. You can see where I'm going with this. One morning, Karen grabbed the wrong toothpicks and sold them to her 5th grade classmates. 5th graders, tripping their balls off. Fitz told me everyone was sweating profusely and a few kids began to cry late into the day. Local sheriff was called and the whole thing fell on Fitz. 5th grade Fitz was like, screw this. Karen's brother is a druggy weirdo and Karen sells toothpicks. The school settled with giving both students 2 weeks of in-school suspension. I don't know what happened to the brother. Story 8. I ran it. For a few spare years in elementary, books got banned in the classroom. Not blacklisted books, but literally books in general. They were far too distracting, even though most kids read when done with work, etc. I started smuggling books to school and peddling them out to kids. It started out innocently. I had loads of Hank the Cow Dog books that I was super into and I hid them in my desk, and I loaned them out to close friends when asked. But soon, the entire class knew, and that spread to the whole school. I became a full-time book smuggler. I had a system where there was a 2-week borrowing limit, kept a log of who, what book, when, ran a teensy little library for myself basically, and I made sure these kids were treating the books fairly. If anything came back damaged, they were banned from borrowing. Kept this up until middle school, which was considerably less totalitarian. I can't even fathom a school banning books. That has to be right up there with the dumbest school rules I've ever heard. Story 9. During elementary school in the 80s, many candies weren't individually wrapped for resale in stores, think Warheads, etc. I bought bulk packs of candy, didn't matter what kind. Although atomic fireballs were my cash cow. I individually packaged them, or maybe a couple to a pack depending on the candy. I used those tiny Ziplocs you see people use for drugs. Being around adults a little devoid of scruples, I was able to get those in bulk from a local head shop called High on the Hill. It was a surreal time looking back. I was the only supplier for a year solid in 4th grade. I made so much bank for a 10-year-old, it was insane. I would make $100 a week just off of atomic fireballs. The bulk jugs were about $5 or $6 each wholesale, and at a quarter each it worked out to about $60 a jug profit if I recall. Luckily, school came easy to me, because it was a full-time job keeping stock, packaging product, counting piles of change, budgeting, keeping a bank register. Mom got a separate account that I used for my money, dodging the man, etc. It was turbulent, as I never really had a group of friends as a kid. But in the 4th grade, I was the frickin' man. Going from having no real good friends and having my time divided by either being picked on or ignored to becoming the belle of the ball was surreal. Even at that time, I was able to realize what was going on. Their smiles were all fake. Their interest was not in me, but rather what was in my bag any given day. Girls were not saying hello because they were being polite or even the least bit interested in talking to me. They were just waiting their turn for their fix. That denim bag got more attention than I ever dreamed of. I was just along for the ride. I had laid the groundwork and provided the blueprint. When 5th grade started, there was competition, but they were weak. They would always sell out or only buy enough to make a few bucks here and there, largely selling lollipops or pre-packed stuff, Hershey's Kisses, bit of honey, Tootsie Rolls, that kind of thing. Whatever they could grab at the store before school. It was amateur hour. They had made a mockery of something I took seriously as a 10 to 11-year-old can take something. I closed up shop pretty quickly after the school year began. The fast life and fast money was over. The excitement wasn't there, the smiles weren't as big. Kids came to me as a last resort. They bought the popular kids completely out before looking my way. It was like flipping a switch. My first day without the bag, I had a few kids ask if I was holding, but once word got around that I was out of the game, everything went back to normal. No friends, no conversation, no one to sit with at lunch or on the bus, no one interested, fake or otherwise. It's the only time I had ever really witnessed the dynamic of being disingenuine. I had always been authentic, and after it was all over, I was happy to stay that way. I never really recounted this time into words. As it turns out, I learned a lot of life lessons in the 4th grade. That is some pretty impressive social awareness from OP. You know, just to be able to recognize that all this attention is fake. And it definitely seems like OP learned a lot by doing this. Seems like a bright kid and probably a decently bright person now, so it's no surprise that school came easy. Also, it's 4th grade. I'm glad OP could learn some lessons from this, and make quite a bit of money along the way, at least for a 4th grader. Story 10. I was a Pokemon card smuggler. In 6th grade, my friend's dad overheard my friend and I talking about how much our Pokemon cards were worth. He was shocked to learn some were worth $10 to $20 a piece. He made the comment, "Shame they won't be worth that much when you go to sell them." That comment stuck with me, and a few days later, I started selling my cards at school. I made a list of everything I had with prices next to them. I would pass the list around during class, and kids would meet up with me between classes to buy what they wanted. I was making crazy amounts of money for a middle schooler. And before long, parents were complaining that their kids were skipping lunch because they were spending their lunch money on Pokemon cards. So the school banned them, but I still had quite a bit of inventory to move. I did all kinds of things to avoid getting caught. I hid cards in a box of crayons. I put a few sheets of sleeves in the middle of a binder full of legit notes. I even hollowed out an old textbook to hide all of my cards. Despite getting searched 3 to 5 times over the next few weeks, my cards were never found, and I was able to sell them all before Christmas break. I ended up making close to $800 and was able to buy my entire immediate and extended family Christmas gifts with my own money for the first time. Once all the other kids learned how much money I had, they were blown away, and suddenly everyone was selling their cards. Problem was, no one was buying them anymore. Story 11. I used to deal in whiteboard markers for teachers in high school. One teacher had a tendency to hoard them, leaving none for the other teachers. I would take markers from him and provide them to other teachers in need. While there was no formal payment, I was given a little bit more leniency at times. One example being requests to leave the classroom for a moment. That kind of thing. Once the marker would start squealing on the whiteboard because it was almost empty, I'd get teachers giving me a nod as if to say, "You got the goods?" I would then supply them with the marker color of their choosing, usually black. It was a lot of fun, and I never heard teachers talk about my systems or chastise me for taking markers. Story 13. My school was an extremely conservative Christian boarding school. Things that were forbidden were, by no means a complete list, jeans for girls, shorts for everyone, candy, any sort of food in the dorms, cell phones, any form of gaming system, TV, movies, playing any non-Christian songs on musical instruments, clothes made by popular brands, A&F and Hollister, etc. Naturally, there were a few students who started selling food, candy, and A&F/Hollister clothes. Why people bought these from them, I don't know. But they made huge amounts of money. A lot of the kids at that school were rich doctors' kids, so there was plenty of money to go around. One guy sold a box of Altoids for $15. Story 13. I was the dirty magazine dealer when I was in middle school in the 80s. First, I found my parents' stash. Boxes and boxes and boxes. Basement boxes by the washing machine and under the Civil War swords, guest bedroom under the bed at least 50, standing cabinet in the kitchen, cabinets near the ceiling, all over their bedroom under the china. We were riddled with it. Yeah, I went through my parents' bedroom. There were hundreds of adult magazines in the house and I was 11. Only God and my parents knew what was in there and I had to find out. After I'd gotten bored of some, I started selling them to other kids. $20 each in 1984 money. The magazine market was booming, selling to other adolescents. I had a client base and had to get more. I'd go into a bookstore and ask for the most esoteric book that I could imagine. The clerk would go check in the back and I would stuff all the Penthouse/Playboy mags in my bag and book it. Maybe a comic book too, treat yourself. Many years later, I returned to my hometown and went to the bookstore. I wanted to apologize and try to make up for it somehow. It was gone. Sorry about that, Walden Books. We were boys and you had breasts. So, is this a felony? Because I genuinely don't know, because if a child is distributing adult content to another child, don't get me wrong, it's definitely weird, but is that technically a felony? I would have to assume yes, it's still distributing it to another child. Anyway, that aside, it's certainly a hustle you could have in middle school. Story 14. Myself and 3 other friends, all Asian, sold those Asian jelly straws, something non-Asian kids are unfamiliar with, but we were in love with when discovered. As well as caramel apple pops and Mexican lollipops, large Latin community, and saw the opportunity to make more money, covered in tajin in middle school. Each straw was 25 cents, 5 for $1, and pops would go for 75 cents to $1, depending on the demand. We would each have a jar of the jelly straws in our own locker, as well as a bag of pops and a small box of quarters in cash. Every period, we would restock our backpack and sell while walking to and from class in our class period. It was great. As a middle schooler, $20, split between 4 of us, so $5 per kid, a day was the equivalent of making 6 figures now in adult life. Life was good. Until one day, my friend's locker got broken into. Someone had watched over his shoulder when he put in his combination and came back later. They took all the snacks, all the cash, about $100, and everything else in the trash. School eventually banned the jelly straws, but not the pops. Large Latin community still brought their own to eat as snacks, and made students who got caught reselling snacks get suspended. My 3 friends and I were content back then. We made roughly $2,000 from our classmates, and still got to eat the Asian straws at home. Now I work 40-plus hour weeks to pay rent and eat fast food. Growing up sucks. Story 15. We created an entire black market currency and economy based on rocks. I used to manage one of 3 mining operations that were running concurrently on the elementary school playground back in the mid to late 90s. This story was located in a small town in southeast Tennessee, rural and bordered by the Cherokee National Forest. The shinier or smoother the rock, the more valuable it could be. Rocks were traded between kids and their peers for snacks, drinks, homework bribes, even protection from bullies. Whoever controlled the rocks controlled the playground. My operation had the largest kids, using the biggest boulders that were chipped into rounded points to break up the largest rocks down to manageable sizes for a bunch of little kids. And we had the most hands with sticks and straight-edged rocks for digging and dirt displacement. At the end of a day of work, we would place a huge rock on top of our mining hole, too big for most anyone to lift besides a few select guys that all worked for me. Of course, I'm sure any of the 4th, 5th, or 6th graders could have at the time, had they cared to. 2 other operations existed, one that was made up of all girls, though their rock output was shabby at best, and another group that did their work inside of the dome-shaped jungle gym, providing the most protection from intruders and thieves, while also providing line-of-sight obstruction to the teachers and others. As a manager, I would walk the edge of the playground looking for strong sticks and perfect digging rocks, because the durability of sticks and pieces of chipped rock required a pretty steady supply of unbroken tools to work with. On the occasion that the classes had recess at different times, a lot of thievery and sabotage would happen. Rocks would get stolen and mining holes would get filled with trash and debris. I recently visited the old school, which was closed in the mid-2000s. It's now abandoned and has fallen into disrepair. The hole, though, it's still there. All this time still hasn't fixed the impact my class and others had on that old playground. That's about all I can remember from experience. But I do still have my own personal collection of rocks from that playground that I took home bit by bit over many years in elementary school. A box full of stupidity and imagination. OP must be the youngest foreman I've ever heard of. And also, this is proof. The children yearn for the mines. Send them back. They're ready. Story 16. In our college, our dorm RAs decided to run this thing where if you were being a model citizen in their eyes, they would give these little printed pieces of fake money that were printed on different colors of heavy paper. You could use these to redeem at the front desk for stuff that cost money to rent, like pots and pans, video games, etc. We found out that the campus bookstore sold the same type of paper that they were using, and so with a little time in Photoshop later, we were able to mass produce these things that were worth $1 each for something like 3 cents. We didn't get caught, but the RAs dropped the program after they had a big event for people to turn in their coupon things, and they ended up with 650 more than they thought were in circulation. In our defense, we were bored. Story 17. I ran a black market sour gumball operation in grade 5. We would buy them in bulk, sell them for 5 cents each, and make about $12 in profit a bag. Did it just off of the school property line at the edge of the field, so it was all legit. One of our staff was a keener with a principal for a father and a teacher for a mother. He cracked under questioning from staff and narked us out. Even though we weren't doing anything against school rules and we weren't on school property, I feigned illness the next day, let the whole thing blow over, and nothing came of it. I had hustlin' in my blood from a young age. Story 18. Lemon heads, Johnny Apple treats, Jolly Rancher sticks, Red Hots, etc. Most of them cost 10 cents at the store and I charged 25. Only made like $5 a week, but this was the 80s. Also, we had a huge marble thing going on during recess. Lots of trading, purchases, etc. Everyone was convinced dough baby marbles, clay marbles, were worth a lot more than others. In the 80s, a lot of the old World War II era clay marbles ended up in grandkids' collections. The kids weren't wrong. There just weren't that many actual dough babies around in school. I had one real one. I found a pharmacy in the next town over that sold bags of ceramic marbles that looked and felt like clay. I didn't flood the market exactly, but I did get plenty of free candy and pop after school, as well as my pick of the best marbles on the playground. Story 19. Salt. And I ran it. I was one of the few kids who brought my own lunch to school, because we couldn't afford to pay for school lunches, and my mom was too proud to sign up for a reduced price lunch. Given the state of cafeteria food, I really didn't mind too much. One time, I brought some hard-boiled eggs to school, probably right after Easter. Of course, I brought salt to put on them, but I brought way too much, because what 6th grader knows how much they need? A couple of friends asked for some of my salt because the soup from the cafeteria was so bland. I gave them some. That brought down the wrath of the teachers upon our heads because we were destroying the delicate nutritional balance of their bland soup, and salt was banned from the cafeteria. But since I was bringing my own lunches, I found ways to sneak salt in. And eventually, I had a whole black market for salt like this was frickin' 1st century Rome or something. Salt packets from fast food places were especially convenient, though you had to hide the evidence. I hated that school so much. It was a relief to transfer to the new charter school the next year. Suddenly, I wasn't constantly in trouble for things like getting bullied. I actually learned things. Amazing. Banning salt? This is the most dystopian thing I've ever heard. No, kids, this is a perfectly balanced meal. You are going to suffer. Your small kidneys can't take all that salt. Salt isn't even that bad for you. Like, if you have a whole bunch of it, sure, but they're not gonna have a whole bunch of it. They just want some flavor in their meal. Also, I might just say, this is the whitest thing I have ever heard. I can't imagine any other culture culinarily letting anyone get away with this. Season your food, people. Anyway, that's all the time we have for today, so thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day or night wherever you are, and I will see you in the next one.